Well, happy Friday to you. So this is our Friday Business of Geospatial talk. I should kind of call this the Geospatial Friday meditation or something. You can sit back, close your eyes. But let's keep with the original title. So I'm going to talk to you today about a webinar you do not want to miss. And some of you might have seen some of the things I've posted on this, but I wanted to give you some more background on why next Tuesday a group of us are planning to do a geospatial webinar, and how this webinar is probably a little bit different to the ones that you've seen in the past. So just to give you some background, I have lived my life in the world of geospatial. Geospatial 1.0 specifically is how some of us have kind of been defining that. It's a convenient sort of umbrella term. And it's really, I go back to the 90s when I started working with GIS technology. Now, I've been noticing that it's got a long history, geospatial. I'm not going to go into, if you want to read more about sort of thoughts around the world of geospatial and 1.0, feel free to go look at some of the other things I've written. But I'm very interested in where we sit in that world of 1.0. We've got big companies. Esri are one of those examples. Hex and Geospatial. There's a lot of companies that I would kind of maybe put into that 1.0 category. They've been in the space for a long time. They've got established products. But I'm beginning to see a trend in that world where, and I'm going to give you a couple of quotes actually, and both of them from Esri's folks that I really respect. I could have found other quotes from other folks and from other companies, but these two have particularly resonated with me. We're in a place with the 1.0 world where, as Adam says, and Adam's an evangelist at Esri, GIS needs rebranding. I think he actually sort of describes it as geospatial, but my geospatial 1.0 idea is really that we're talking about a GIS predominantly. So rebranding in Adam's terms, and I totally agree with him, is that but for a long time people talk about being map makers and no more than that, and that obviously minimizes and lessens the importance of geospatial technology, GIS, in Adam's specific case. So Adam did a really good podcast on this if you're interested, so to look that up. So we've arrived at a place in the 1.0 world where the organizations that are selling products there have sort of saturated. I'm not going to, don't get me wrong, this is just my impression. The market's kind of saturated, and there's a huge opportunity beyond the sectors, particularly the public sectors where geospatial is being sold, and now that's being explored. I'm going to put Chris Andrews' quote up here. Chris Andrews is a GIS guy in the 3D team, another guy that I great deal of respect for him. Actually, Chris was a guy that really opened my eyes to the possibilities of 3D. But Chris said in a podcast just recently that we need to get away from the map generation pattern. And in Chris's terms, well, actually, not just in Chris's terms, what Chris is really talking about there is the pattern that we've historically worked with within the GIS 1.0 world. Again, I'll call it that. Is an analyst gets a problem, he gathers the right data to solve that problem. He does his analysis using a desktop tool, QGIS, ArcGIS Pro, whatever that expert technology is, and he outputs a map. And that's the traditional place that we've been. And both Adam and Chris are suggesting, we need to broaden beyond that. And I totally agree with that. So the 1.0 world is my definition is sort of the existing world. And these are some of the challenges that we're facing that we need to overcome. Let me move this forward. So I've written a lot about 2.0, and really the 2.0 world is another convenient umbrella term for what is this emerging world that we're seeing, where we've got new miniaturized sensors that we're putting in satellites, we're putting them in airplanes, we're putting them in drones, they're terrestrial, IoT. So we're collecting incredible, LiDAR's another one, we're collecting incredible amounts of location-based data now, tsunami of data as I like to call it. And we've now got artificial intelligence and machine learning, which has reached a point of maturity where we can actually start using these automated tools to actually analyze that data. And that data is not only static data, it's dynamic data as well. So it's near real time or it's real time data. So we've moved into this new exciting world, and you'll see a lot of talk about space, and there's a lot of venture capital money pouring into the space economy. That's not just the hardware, that's also the downstream stuff, the data that we're the data that's generated from satellites, Earth observation. Most people attach that to satellites, but it's actually more than that. It's anything that's looking at the Earth, and it's actually integrated to stuff that's on the Earth as well. So Earth observation is somewhat, people are somewhat confused by it, but it really is that ability that we've got to look at our Earth from above and integrate the data we're collecting from that with stuff that's on the Earth. So, climate change and sustainability are often things associated with that. Big new area. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, again, lots of stuff going on there. LI, location intelligence, all the terminology we're now using on how we can actually process that data. This world of 2.0, which I've spent a lot of time in the last 8 months, talking to a lot of organizations all over the world in this place, is really filled with startups. And there's a huge amount of innovation going on there. So it's a really exciting area. A lot of these guys are not very familiar with the 1.0 world. They don't know a lot about GIS. They don't know a lot about the history of where we've been. So they're really out of the gate, excited to solve new problems. But one of the challenges that they've got is at the moment there's a lot of solution providers and not so many buyers. Um, and you'll see many conversations just in the world of satellites that the main buyer of satellite imagery, of SAR, radar from Earth's orbiting satellites, is the military and defense. How do we move beyond that? So there's a lot of conversations, a lot of people that are out there trying to sell solutions. There aren't so many buyers. I always liken it to the early days of the internet. Lots of people trying to build their business models and get generate revenue. There is there, and again, I'm generalizing here, but there is a mentality out there of if we build it, they will come. The old field of dreams idea. A lot of people are actually building solutions, and whether they be artificial intelligence, machine learning guys that are leveraging data, those that have got data, those in the sort of location intelligence world, that they've sort of built these solutions without really necessarily having a problem that they're solving. And a lot of them are kind of going around the places saying, well, now we've got this algorithm written, this artificial intelligence algorithm, pattern recognition, for example, what can we solve with it? So I'm seeing a lot of that as well. So it's very much a young, exciting, interesting world with, I would say, not very mature business models. I just want to briefly mention this. I could go into all sorts of other places because geospatial is really in so many spheres now. But if we start talking about the big technology companies, there's a trend that you'll notice where Microsoft and Amazon, as two just pure technology companies, have started to explore and work in the geospatial field. And that's not just a pure mapping area, but the deeper analytical pieces to that. In case of Amazon, for example, drones and door-to-door delivery is something that they're looking at. There's a whole world out there that, and there's some AWS stuff just being released that you might be worth looking at. That's really fascinating. These guys are exploring it a great deal and putting quite a lot of money internally against the geospatial world. And then you've got those that are focused on consumer products, sorry, on the consumer. And these are primarily data companies: Google, Facebook, Instagram. They're all data companies, but they're all buying at the moment geospatial companies and they're building their own internal units. Google have been at it a lot longer than the other guys that are really looking at how can they leverage just the location-based data and in an analytical way provide answers to questions. So there is a massive amount going on, is my point, and it's a really confusing space. So I've kind of put this title up at the top here: Chaos Today, which leads to an amazing tomorrow. And I do feel as though we're in this really chaotic period where the old is meeting the new, the big are beginning to realize the benefits of it. And I haven't even touched on business BI and business intelligence. There's another world out there, but we're in this sort of chaotic time, but we all know it's leading to an amazing tomorrow. So the reason I'm going through this today is because I wanted to tell you about a webinar that we're doing Tuesday week. So not this coming Tuesday, the following, the 27th at 12 o'clock Eastern time. We've titled it Geospatial is Everywhere, so what next? And what I wanted to do with this, I obviously talk a lot to folks in the industry, those in the established world and those in the new world. I wanted to bring some folks together who had different perspectives on this world that we're living in, this chaotic world that we're currently inhabiting, and just to get their thoughts. And so this is really a different webinar. It's one I've listened to lots of webinars which have particular focuses, whether they're product centric, whether they're very technical. This one is really I'm going to include myself in that, three experts and me. I'll put this, maybe I'm an expert. I suppose I've been doing it for 25 years. I'll call myself an expert, but I don't like to ring my bells like that. But anyway, moving on. So let me just talk about who's involved, the four people. So I'm not going to introduce these folks, but if you don't know Nadine, the CEO of OGC, you should know her. She's an amazing lady. She's so smart. She's got degrees after degrees. She's just an amazing lady. She works for a really fascinating organization, a super important organization that has been around for a long time. And she's the CEO of that company. And she has a fascinating perspective on where we are today and what the future holds. So having Nadine as one of the speakers in this, I thought was super important. So Nadine is one of our speakers. Now, Joe's been around for the longest time. Sorry, Joe, Joe's got a hairline. Yeah, she's got more hair than me probably, but Joe's been in the geospatial world forever. Used to work for Pitney Bowes. He's done a lot of things. He used to be, he was one of the owners of Directions magazine. Joe's a really fascinating guy. Again, he's been in the industry for a long time, but he has a really fascinating perspective on where we've been and where we're going. And he's working for Quorum currently as a strategy director there. So Joe has that long history, but his perspective is quite fascinating. Now, I heard Ash, who works for In-Q-Tel, who are a VC, venture capital organization. I listened to her talking about spatial computing, and I was amazed that somebody in that world, as young as Ash. Ash is young, but she's so smart. She actually has got an archaeological background. I mean, she's really an interesting girl. But when I listened to her speaking, and then I spoke to her, I thought, oh my gosh. Ash brings a very different perspective to this world of geospatial. I mean, she doesn't specifically come from that world, but she works in that world and she understands it to the nth degree. And she has certain areas that she's focused in within In-Q-Tel, but her perspective is refreshing and different to both Nadine's, mine, and Joe's. So we all have different perspectives on where we've been and where we're going. And I thought having Ash in the conversation was really important. And then there's me. I've been, as I mentioned, I've been in the industry for 25 years, and I now work for Wyre there. I've got this sort of title as geospatial consultant. Really, my big goal has always been, how do we bridge the gap between the old and the new worlds? And I'm really talking about that, thinking about the fact that the commercial world really has never fully adopted geospatial. Geospatial and GIS have always really been a public sector, tier one retailers, tier one, big utilities. It's really been those guys that have got a GIS department and GIS experts. Where the world is moving to, and where I'm really excited, and why I talk a lot about Geospatial 2.0, is we're now beginning to talk to banks and finance companies and insurance companies and retailers, and everyone is beginning to realize that the importance of geospatial, and my interest is really the commercialization of geospatial. So that's really my focus. So those are the four speakers. I just wanted to point you back to this. It's the 27th. It's from 12 to 1 Eastern time. I'm going to share a link to for you to subscribe to the webinar, and I strongly encourage you to come to it. As Nadine said today in a post, she said this will be one of the more unusual and hopefully enlightening webinars that you'll listen to this year on geospatial. So we're looking forward to seeing you there. Thanks very much for watching.